Today's episode is sponsored in part by MindMeister, my favorite online collaboration tool for brainstorming, organizing your thoughts, creating presentations, and so much more. MindMeister is the world-leading mind mapping solution with over 7 million users, including SAP, Oracle, CNN, Philips, and Vodafone, and has been recommended by the New York Times, Forbes Magazine, Zapier, Lifehacker, Entrepreneur, CIO, Business Insider, and of course, the PM for the Masses podcast. You can get 10% off any paid plan by using my special discount code MASSES, M-A-S-S-E-S, MASSES. You can go to mindmeister.com to get started, and don't forget to use the coupon code MASSES at checkout.
Project managers, have you ever felt like you should get that promotion or a better job? Start a business, write that book. Have you ever felt you were made for more but didn't know where to start?
Welcome to the PM for the Masses podcast with your host, Caesar Abaid.
Learn from the experts, think outside the box, have a voice, network, and be extraordinary.
PM for the Masses podcast.
Well, hello everybody and welcome once again. I'm Caesar Abaid, your host, and this show is your regular reminder that your career matters more than your job, and that your life is a project and you are the manager. Whether you work for a company or for yourself, your job stability is really just your ability to land your next gig. So, join me in practicing intentional, planned, and value-adding relevance starting right now. It is a new year, everybody, so Happy New Year. It is now January of 2021, and it's been a roller coaster for everybody. You know, this entire past year, and 2021 hasn't been easy either. So today, I'm hoping to bring some joy to you, and we're going to talk about joy in the workplace. And this is not something you hear very often. We often hear about productivity and cutting costs and profits, but how about increasing joy, right? So to talk about that today, I'm going to bring you Richard Sheridan. And this is an interview that I recorded a little while back, and it's been sitting here just waiting for me to have the, mental bandwidth and time and basically find some joy in my own heart to podcast again. It's been a tough few months for me, and not that anything bad happened to me, not any worse than anybody else. I mean, just, it's lockdown, it's pandemic, but for some reason that the last few months have been kind of dark for me. I'm usually a very happy person, full of joy, and I just couldn't find it in me the last few months. And podcasting was one of the things that I just didn't do. Luckily, it turns out that it's, I needed some medication for a couple of things that were going on, and now I'm feeling much better. So here I am again behind the microphone. And to talk about joy today, as I said, I bring you Richard Sheridan. Menlo Innovations CEO Richard Sheridan became disillusioned in the middle of his career in the chaotic technology industry. He had an all-consuming thought: things can be better, much better. He had to find a way. Why couldn't the workplace be filled with camaraderie, human energy, creativity, and productivity? Ultimately, Rich co-founded Menlo Innovations in 2001 to end human suffering in the workplace. Menlo's unique approach to custom software creation is so surprisingly different that 3,000 people a year travel from around the world just to see how they do it. Rich's passion for creating joyful work environments led to his best-selling and widely celebrated book, Joy Inc., How We Built a Workplace People Love. His second book, Chief Joy Officer, continues to prove that a positive and engaging leadership style is actually good for business. Good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing well, Caesar. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. As we both established, it's 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and it's quite something, isn't it?
I don't know how it is in London, but here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, it is a beautiful day. You guys have probably had a gorgeous summer like we have.
This has been one of the best summers I've been in Canada for 20 years. Well, North America for 23 years. This was one of the best summers ever.
Yes, it's nice that the weather has treated us nicely given everything else that's going on.
Right. It's like, yeah, I'll have to stay home in backyard. So how about we, the weather gods decided to open the clouds and let the sun shine.
Exactly.
Speaking of sunshine, today we're gonna talk about joy and joy in organizations and in leadership. And you have written extensively about this, and we already established that it is a topic you can talk about for a long time. So it's perfect for a podcast episode.
I think there's no better time for talking about joy than the time we're in right now.
Right. And for folks listening to this in the future, this is August of 2020, and I'm sure 2020 will be a milestone year in the history books for obvious reasons. So let's start with this then. Like, what is joy?
Yeah, and I differentiate between joy and happiness. And I think one could successfully argue on either side of the equation. So I'll just give my definition. Happiness is, and we should all have happiness in our lives as much as possible. But happiness is momentary. Happiness is kind of a momentary state of well-being. Perhaps something really good happened and you're just happy right now. Joy for me is a much longer arc. Joy is the result of hard work done well, often in groups, and achieving some wonderful outcome. And that can be in our families, that can be in our workplaces, that can be in our communities. But this sense of joy comes from the satisfaction of hard work done really well.
Okay, that makes sense. So happiness is temporary, and joy is like long standing and deeper, I guess.
Yeah, I think that we all want joy in our lives. There's no question about that. But the things that really matter to us are hard. They require hard work. Raising a good family, building a good business, having a good project outcome. These are all things that are difficult. If they weren't difficult, they wouldn't necessarily be worth doing. They wouldn't be as valuable as in fact they turn out to be.
Right.
And I think it'd be really difficult to be happy every minute on working on something that difficult. I think that might even require medication or something like that. But joy is that sense of we did it. Think of running a marathon, for example, all the training you do, all the preparation, and then the day of, and, nobody, I don't think, who crosses the finish line in a marathon is feeling particularly happy at that moment. But there is that sense of deep satisfaction that they accomplished a worthy goal.
Okay. Do you also find that maybe if you have joy, it's easier to go through unhappy times?
Yeah, I think that, what we've done at Menlo Innovations, my company here in Ann Arbor, is focus on what we call the business value of joy. And we did that by creating a very intentional culture. And that culture is focused on creating these great outcomes for the people we serve. And so I think that when you have a purpose-driven organization, one that understands who they serve and what would delight look like for them, and then you get the camaraderie of people binding together to produce those kind of great outcomes, you end up with a better business, you end up with a better culture, you end up with people who care for each other and trust one another and are in good relationship with one another. And all of that adds up to a great outcome in so many different ways.
Okay, so purpose, camaraderie, resulting in better culture, resulting in joy. Interesting. So what are then, besides these three, let's say somebody's listening right now and they're not joyful, or let's say they might even be working at a company or for a company who produce, like, for example, I'll give you an example. I have a friend who works for a nonprofit, and it's a nonprofit that does work that he believes in, and yet he doesn't seem to be happy there. Or joyful, to use the right nomenclature. So what could be wrong there?
Well, sometimes I think nonprofits are an interesting element of this pursuit of joy, often very purpose-driven, and sometimes so purpose-driven that they feel like, you know what, we're doing so much good in the world, we don't have to be good to each other. And it's fascinating how often this is the case in the nonprofit world, because you would think that just simply a purpose-driven organization would be enough. I have a metaphor I use for creating a culture of joyful leadership. And it's a fairly simple one to imagine. I'm a private pilot, so I have a pilot's license. I've learned to fly little airplanes. And so I have a pretty good understanding of what keeps an airplane in the air. But I think most of us have an intrinsic understanding that there are four basic forces that work on an airplane. And I can draw an analogy to human organizations. There's the force of lift that keeps it up in the air, the force of weight that holds us down, the force of thrust that pulls us forward, and the force of drag that holds us back. And those four forces are always at work on an aircraft. And in order for that plane to get off the ground and fly somewhere successfully, there has to be more lift than weight, and there has to be more thrust than drag. And if you draw the line between that and human organizations and describe a human organization with those same four kind of forces, there's the lift of human energy, the weight of bureaucracy, the thrust of purpose, and the drag of fear. And if those forces, again, aren't in the right balance, your organizational aircraft won't get off the ground every day. I think a lot of times people believe that simply having a purpose-driven organization is enough, and it isn't. If you don't have enough human energy in your organization, if you don't lighten up the load of bureaucracy enough to allow that lift to overcome it, or if you manage people with too much fear to hold them back, the purpose alone isn't enough. You have to look at the whole of the organization and how you're treating your people, how you're communicating with each other. And I think a lot of times people get into nonprofits, they aren't necessarily wired to be effectively joyful leaders. They're so focused on the mission, they almost don't care enough about how the people are being treated to accomplish their goal.
So let me take a minute to talk about my favorite remote collaborating tool. It's called MindMeister, and it's a mind mapping application. MindMeister is a completely web-based mind mapping software that runs in any standard web browser. So the mind maps you create are saved automatically in the cloud, online, and can be accessed from anywhere. If you don't know what a mind map is, think of it as a free-flowing visual outline tool that can be used for anything you want. So I've been using MindMeister for 10 years now. It is by far my favorite tool for organizing my thoughts, for sharing my thoughts with my team, and also for collaborating with other people. So, for example, it is a perfect tool for you to create a WBS, a work breakdown structure. It's beautifully laid out, it's all online, and it's a wonderful company. So aside from the web app, MindMeister also offers native mobile apps for iPhone, iPad, even Apple Watch and Android devices, which means that you can access, edit, and present your maps no matter where you are. MindMeister was made as intuitive and as fast as possible to ensure that you can fully concentrate on the creative task at hand. So there's no clutter, no friction, just your team and your ideas. And speaking of teams, unlike traditional mind mapping tools, MindMeister lets you brainstorm in real time with an unlimited number of users. So I do this all the time. I'll brainstorm something by myself using a mind map, and then I share that with my coworkers who are far away, and they hop in and they help me out with brainstorming and moving things around. It's really cool. And MindMeister has a special code that will give you a 10% discount for my audience. If you go to pmforthemasses.com/mindmap, pmforthemasses.com/mindmap, if you sign up for any of the paid accounts, you can put in the code MASSES, as in PM for the Masses, so MASSES, and you'll get 10% off. And you don't even need to upgrade to a paid plan because MindMeister offers a free plan that it's a bit limited, but you can try it out. And then if you like it and you want to upgrade, you can use that code. That's a great way for you to get started. And if you do upgrade, it's a great way to support this podcast. And also, you will let them know, the folks at MindMeister, that you heard about MindMeister here on the PM for the Masses podcast. So again, pmforthemasses.com/mindmap and enter the code MASSES for 10% off. Now back to the show.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to mention any names, but I do know folks who are very active, in their, let's say in their, how can I say this? Very active outside of the home in trying to make the world a better place. Okay.
Look, I'll go there for you. Let me say it because I have a strong faith walk, and I've been involved in churches for a long time.
You have, okay.
In leadership. And my co-founder once was invited to a pastor's conference, and they wanted to find out where he was at before they put him up on stage. And he said, he says, if you want to see challenges in organizations, let's look at corporations. He says, if you want to see even more challenged organizations in culture, let's look at nonprofits. But the worst case example you'll often find in churches. And he's sitting at the table with all of these pastors, and he was waiting to see their reaction, and they leaned in and they said, "You're going to be perfect for our conference. Would you please say that on the stage?" And I think we forget sometimes, and look, I mean, it's just easy to almost do a characterization of any type of organization and see where things are broken. This is true in all kinds of human organizations. It's true in families. It's true in communities. It's true in nations, right? So this isn't unique to any type of organization, but you often see these patterns. And again, I just think if you look at those four forces at work, we have to take all of them into consideration to have an effective organization.
That is a great analogy. And again, can you go over the parallels between lift and drag and the other two?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at lift first. Lift of human energy. Talk about any company, the one you work for, the one I've created, other organizations where we've worked. You can typically feel the human energy of those teams, whether it's there or it's absent. And when it's absent, it's almost breathtaking. It almost and I literally mean that, like it takes the breath out of you, right? Without that human energy of camaraderie, sometimes it's simply humor. I think the best way to get to human energy in organizations is the ability to go to work and get meaningful things actually done, which speaks to project management and reducing ambiguity and increasing clarity. There's a lot of things we can do as leaders to lift the human energy of our team. Sometimes it can be as simple as relationship building things like saying good morning to people as they enter the office. And I think in particular right now, with all of us in a work from home environment, this focus on human energy and building the relationship among our team members is very important. I think we have to kind of double down. We have to make a deeper investment in making sure we're staying in touch with our people, because right now we are risking the opposite. We are risking isolation. We are risking loneliness. We're in danger of taking the human energy out of our organizations because of this isolation type of environment we're working in now. I think a lot of people are like, no, I love working from home. Well, sure. Yeah, for a little while, until all of a sudden you're not being tuned into what's going on in the large organization. You don't know what other conversations are going on. You don't feel a part of the mix. So I think as any of us in our organizations learn to adapt to a more distributed environment, we have to keep our focus on keeping the human energy high. Yeah. The weight, the countervailing force that pulls us down, what I call the weight of meeting load. You know, you look at some large organizations and there's usually a layer of management from that layer and above. They're literally a human sacrifice to meetings, right? And if the organization's inclination is when a new idea comes up, somebody says, hey, let's form a committee to write a policy around that idea. If they're more inclined to take a meeting versus take action, you are increasing that bureaucratic load on the organization. And that tends to suck the human energy out of an organization. Mm-hmm. The thrust of purpose, understanding who we serve, what would delight look like for them. And when I talk about purpose for an organization, I want to look outside the organization. I want to look past actually the traditional stakeholders of an organization, look past customers and shareholders and even employees. Focus on the people we serve beyond those constituencies. Sometimes it's harder to imagine than people realize, but it's just so important because that kind of purpose is what drives organizations. So, for example, at Menlo, we are a software design and development firm. We do custom software design and development for our business customers. The people we focus on are not the people who pay us, not the people we will ever typically meet in large numbers. Quite frankly, the people who don't even know who we are. They are the end users of the software we're creating, who one day show up to work and somebody says, hey, a new piece of software is on your desktop. You have to use it now every day. And I bet most people greet that moment with utter dread. Like, oh no, I got used to the old system and it was terrible, but I don't want to get to the new terrible system. Our goal is to light those end users. Think of a life insurance company. You could think that perhaps their focus of purpose should be on the policyholders, but I think more appropriately it should be on the beneficiaries of the policy. People who didn't pay for the policy, people who don't even know the life insurance company exists, people who don't even know there's a policy in place until an important life event happens to someone who loved them enough to buy a policy to protect them. And that life insurance company should be focused on them. That kind of purpose-driven organization can really pull you through some tough times. And then finally, that drag of fear. I don't know about you, but when I was in my earliest phases of my managerial career, as I was beginning to be elevated up the ladder within the organizations I worked for, I was taught to lead with fear because I was led with fear. And so I was pretty good at raising an eyebrow at meetings. I was pretty good at crossing my arms across my chest and heaving a sigh when I wasn't happy. And everybody'd be like, oh no, what's Rich thinking right now? And so that idea of fear, particularly the fear we manufacture, the artificial fear that we use to try and motivate people, that's the kind of fear we need to work to eliminate. Look, we can't eliminate all fear like we can't eliminate all bureaucracy. There are some natural things that we should be afraid of, right? We should be afraid of running out of cash, going out of business. There's a reason we look both ways when we cross the street. There's a reason we're wearing face masks right now. There are things we should be afraid of because they keep us alive. But when we start as leaders manufacturing fear in order to motivate others, we're running into trouble. We're stealing away the energy of our people. And it puts us into reptile brain and takes us out of that most human part of our brain, where creativity, imagination, energy, innovation come from.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So what are your thoughts on, the people call it the work-life balance, right? Because people show up for work and it's 8 hours of their day. Another 8 hours they sleep, right? So it's a big chunk of their time. Do you find it healthy to draw a line between, your work life and your non-work life? And what is the balance there? the danger that I see, in my team and folks that I work with is that sometimes they take work so seriously that when things go wrong during the day at work, it spoils the entire day, right? And then if that happens again the day after and the day after, they're having a difficult life when it's work that's difficult. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, so many. Let's talk about balance first. Right. Number one, we should all recognize we only have one life, and our work and our life outside of work need to be able to integrate in a way that does produce a balance, a healthy balance. There's that old saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Well, that dullness is loss of human energy, loss of spirit, loss of motivation, right? And we want people coming into work motivated. We want them coming into work inspired. If they're tired all the time, it's not going to happen. They can't sleep at night because they're worried about things that are going on at work, and they feel alone and isolated, and it's their sole responsibility. We're going to burn them out. And so as leaders, we have to think about this. Now, I'm going to guess there's a number of your audience members who are thinking to themselves, Cesar, what company are you talking about where you only work 8 hours a day? I'm working 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, right? And that is that incessant overtime that is often the case in many organizations really diminishes the human spirit of your team. And so I think we have to be careful as leaders. I've often coached people who I know well who are looking at new jobs or careers or maybe just getting out of college, and they're wondering about life outside of school and that sort of thing, and work life in particular. And I warn them, I say, look, if you go to a company who says, hey, we're going to give you a laptop, we're going to give you a cell phone, we're going to allow you to work from anywhere, be careful. Because what they might be saying is, we expect you to be available 24/7. Work from anywhere means work from everywhere. Work whenever you want means work all the time. And you start hearing these stories of people who are jumping out of bed at 3 a.m. because the boss expects a text message to be answered within an hour, no matter when it comes in. And we have to give our people space in order to rejuvenate. So at Menlo, we actually work 40-hour work weeks. We don't work weekends. We don't deny or delay vacation requests. And when you go on vacation, we, through pure pressure alone, cut you off electronically from the company. We will tell you, do not check email while you're away. And if we do, we will chastise you. And if you do it enough, we'll make fun of you when you come back to work. So we make it playful. Mm-hmm. But it's also serious. And part of it is, it's also, and we explain this to our team, if you can't break away from work, if you are so enmeshed in everything we're doing that we can't live without you for a minute, for a day, for a week, we've built our organization incorrectly. We've created a dependency. We've created a hero-based organization, not a systems-based organization. And, it's fun being the hero. It's fun being the person that's central. It's fun, interestingly, there's a reward in being able to come home and talk to your next door neighbor who says, hey, Cesar, how's work going? And you're like, oh, I'm working so hard right now. I can't even see straight. I don't even think I'll be able to take a vacation this summer. I'm working so hard. In those statements, there is reward. Because what you're really saying to your neighbor is, I'm so valuable. They can't live without me. They'd fall apart if I wasn't there. In that hero-based system are those rewards, those intrinsic rewards that we have to be careful of as leaders. If you had come home and said, hey, is somebody's house working? You're like, yeah, it's good. Taking a 2-week vacation with the kids. We're going out west. We're going to see the sights. I don't have to check email on my way, so it's going to be a really good time to rejuvenate. Your next door neighbor would probably be like, are you worried about your job? Sounds like they can live without you. Maybe they're going to decide to do that soon. And I always say that, that we should focus, if you want to create a truly intentionally joyful leadership culture, don't focus on a hero-based organization, focus on a systems-based organization. Hero-based organizations, when things go wrong, you look for the person to blame. System-based organizations, when things go wrong, the leaders step back and say, how did our systems allow this to happen? And most of our systems have to revolve around people.
Fantastic. Yeah. I shared with you before we started here, I work for a fully distributed company, and we were doing this before COVID. And that is a danger of being online all the time. So as a leader, for folks listening right now, you might be a manager right now of a team that is working from home or distributed. It's very important for you to be aware that people might be overworking. Little things like time that you used to take for you to drive to work and think about the tasks, in your commute, and the time to drive back and decompress after the workday.
Yes.
That's now
maybe listen to a book or something like that.
Or to my podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
So those times now are taken up by work. Your commute now is 20 seconds. You roll out of bed and there's your laptop. So be mindful of your folks and how they're spending their time, and be ready to chastise them if they're working, when they're not supposed to. It is a danger for sure.
Well, and I think even individual contributors who aren't managers and leaders of other people have to create their own mental systems for going to work when you're at home, right? Yeah. And I know some people who will get up in the morning and they will go for a long walk, and then they will walk back to their home and start their day. And that break of having an explicit routine that says, I am starting work. And then you could do the same thing at the end of the day and get a little bit of extra exercise as well and refresh your spirit. Make sure you're taking breaks for food and lunch, and maybe taking one walk in the middle of the day, those sort of things. All of these things we need to do, especially now, because it is so easy to just, quite frankly, to just sit and work. Especially those of us whose work involves computers like yours and mine, right? And, just simply making sure you're getting good exercise along the way. Because I'll tell you, I have a particular workout routine I go through, and it makes me so aware of how hunched over I am in front of my computer. Because the exercises I do tend to open up my chest and pull my shoulders back, and I realize, wow, there's really a lot of constriction. I'm not breathing as well, and that sort of thing. And all of that leads to a kind of a increasing amount of stress levels in ourselves that ultimately diminishes our ability to do good work, which is ultimately what we all want in our work lives. We want to go to work. We want to do good things. We want to do, we want to have successful outcomes. We want to feel like we're part of a team.
Agreed. So what are some of the signs that you need more joy and more of these elements in your organization or your team?
Well, I think what I noticed in my own career, and a lot of this was born out of pain. People often ask me, so where'd you come up with all these ideas that you use inside your workplace? I say, I have to describe the 12 years of pain inside my career before you can understand why I would be the guy writing books about joy. Mm-hmm. But what I was noticing was that every day was like firefighting for me. I'm a technical person. I grew up as a programmer. I went to the University of Michigan, got a couple of degrees in computer science and computer engineering. And my first several years of work was writing code. And then, of course, I started moving up the career ladder. And one day I stopped writing code and just led people who were writing code and that sort of thing. And throughout that entire sequence, whether I was the coder or whether I was the manager, the vice president, and so on, it was firefighting every single day. Phones ringing off the hook with problems, sitting down in meetings, just trying to prioritize the backlog of problems because there was more to do than we could. Missing deadlines, blowing budgets, having unhappy users, unhappy customers. And I kept looking at this and saying, there's got to be a better way, or maybe I'm not the guy. Maybe I'm not good enough for this. And, and I started kind of asking around and reading books, and I realized, no, the whole industry is suffering from this. Look, I mean, how many times, I don't know how old you are, Caesar, but I'm 62. In the middle of my career, Windows on our desktops was the predominant operating system. And how many times did any of us experience in the late 80s through the 90s, the blue screen of death?
Yeah.
Right? Now, I will tell you, Microsoft had plenty of money to solve these problems, but they were delivering poor quality to the world. And it was evident every time any one of us, and I used to get one probably once or twice a day, and certainly several times a week, you'd be like, what's going on here? How come a company that large, that technically adept, that one with that much resource couldn't produce a quality product? It was because the systems that were producing it were broken. And so to me, it is that inability to do that thing that is just so drives us. And I will tell you, from an engineering standpoint, I will just speak to my own sort of tribe here. There is ultimately only one thing that produces joy in the life of an engineer, and that is to see their work delivered to the world and delight the people it's intended to serve in large numbers. So much so that people will come back to you later and say, I love what you guys created. Thank you. You made my life better for the work you did. That is joy for the engineer. And I was being denied that joy on every single front. Nobody was happy. I wasn't happy. The people who worked for me weren't happy. The people I worked for weren't happy. The people I worked with weren't happy. The people I served weren't happy. And there was just no joy at all in any of that. And I thought there's just got to be a better way.
Yeah, I agree. And that whole, I'm an engineer too. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, but I did dabble into coding, and now I'm in the software industry. But yeah, I agree. There's no, I remember going into my previous life, we did a lot of work for cement plants, and I wrote a piece of software by myself. It was for managing their internal CCTV cameras and having all in one screen, and you could pan and tilt the cameras from the panel. And I remember selling the system and then going back to visit them 10 years later to talk about something else. And I walk by the control room and I see the monitor that I had provided for them for this. And there was all this whole a whole lot of dust on top of it, because cement plants are really dusty and dirty, and
Yep.
and you could tell that they've been using their hand to kind of wipe the screen, and they were still using that little software that I wrote.
Nice. That's
And
awesome.
it just
Yep.
warms your heart, right?
Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, I think we are wired as human beings to serve others.
Yeah.
That is our highest calling, is to serve others with the work of our hearts, our hands, and our minds. And when we get to do that and do it consistently, do it with enough quality that we feel satisfied in the work we do, there is joy in that.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think I'm inspired. I think people listening right now are inspired as well. Two-part questions. Let's start with the first one. So is there a resource? I know you've written books, so can you talk about them? And then if there's any other resource for people looking to learn more about this and bring more joy into their organizations and their teams?
Yeah, I wrote 2 books on this subject. The world kind of demanded them at a certain point, because you can probably tell when you start talking about this stuff, people just want more.
Right.
And so the books I wrote are called Joy Inc., How We Built a Workplace People Love. And then just a couple of years ago, released the second book in probably what will be a series on joy, Chief Joy Officer, How Great Leaders Elevate Human Energy and Eliminate Fear.
Nice. Okay.
And because people who dive into this topic want to usually dive deep, I put in the appendix of both of those books, books that inspired me, talks that inspired me. So there's a long list. If people want to dive deep, they can just look at the recommended teachers section in both books, because I consider authors to be my teachers now. And so the books that inspired me along the way are also there as well.
Great. Now, just to close it, right now, I'm sure there are folks listening, at least one person listening right now in their lunch break. And it's a stressful day. They're listening to this as they eat their sandwich, and they're going to press stop and go back to work. Is there something actionable that they can do today to get their organization, their team, and their own life in this path towards more joy?
Well, when I give talks on this subject, I'm often faced with this because people want to know, well, what can I do? Because I will tell you, in most circumstances, what will happen is it's very natural. There's nothing wrong with it, but I want to get past this thing that happens for most people. When people hear me speak, read the books, they often have this response: you go, Rich. You tell them how they need to change. Boy, I wish my boss was here to hear this, right? And that's okay. You can share this with your boss. But I will tell you the journey to joy has to start with your own heart. You have to become a different kind of leader. You have to become a different kind of worker. So the first place to start is actually the hardest place to start, and that's inside of you. And I think that's the message I would give. And it can be simple things you can try at first. For example, again, if you were in an office, it's a little bit easier, but you can do the same thing in Zoom meetings and so on. Just be cheerful. Say good morning to people. Ask them how they're doing. Take an interest in the people around you. Make sure that you are joyful to be around yourself. And a lot of that has to do with even just the self-talk in your own head. Are you continually choosing the most pessimistic outcomes, which these days is pretty easy to do? Or are you channeling your inner optimist? Not unicorns and rainbows and sunshine all the time, but is there a possible good outcome here? And could I speak to that possible outcome to potentially inspire others? Where are you spending your time? Where are you? How are you feeding yourself emotionally? Right? Are you reading a lot of negative things? Are you hanging around with negative people? Do you jump into negative conversations? I would guard against that. There was a good time in my career where I was going out to lunch with a bunch of guys that when I'd come back, I thought the world was doomed every day at about 1:00 in the afternoon. And I realized I got to stop hanging out with these guys. They're literally getting me going down a dark path for the world every single day, and it's not healthy for me. So guard yourself, guard your own spirit. Don't let your flame go out. Read. Read my books, read books I recommend, read books other leaders you admire recommend. There's a lot of things you can do to invest in yourself, and start there.
Fantastic. Rich, this was amazing. Thank you so much for all these insights. If folks want to learn more about you and what you do in Menlo, where should they go?
Yeah, we have a website. It has a lot of good stories on it. MenloInnovations.com. They can reach me on Twitter at MenloPrez, Prez, or they can write me an email at rsheridan@MenloInnovations.com.
And I'll have links to all these in the show notes for today's episode, which you can find at pmforthemasses.com/133 for episode 133. Rich, thank you so much. Yeah, what a pleasure it was to talk to you today.
Great talking with you too, Caesar.
Thank Thank you for listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
Tune in next week for more great ideas on how to manage your projects better and truly stand out in your industry.
PMforthemasses.com